Good morning and welcome to Peggy's Place. I'm Lindsey, your host today here at KGUA in Wallala 88.3 FM, and we are streaming around the world at kgua.org, and we're live on YouTube again today. We have with us from the UK, Stella James, who is going to be talking with us about ethical horsemanship and all that entails about the communication between horses and humans and between humans and humans. We're going to get into that in just a moment and all of her training that she's had over the years. First, I have a few announcements, local announcements here. We've got a lot of art exhibits opening here on the coast. We're on the Northern California coast. We've got so many art galleries. The first one is going to be in the Sea Ranch at Linden Design Gallery, and he is featuring, and they are featuring, both Maynard and Lou are featuring the collaborative works by the late Al Boki and his granddaughter Mael Boki Sand. And that's going to be today. Actually, it's going to be Saturdays, 11 a.m. to 5 p.m., but in the local paper, they have it for today. So I would contact them to see if they have a special opening today. And you can reach them at lindendesign@me.com or loulinden@me.com. In the Wallala Arts, opening up this weekend on today, Friday, The Seriousness of Purpose, and that's a multi-artist invitational exhibit featuring the works of many artists. And that reception is 4 to 6 p.m. today, and the exhibit runs through March the 5th. And for more information, go to gualalaarts.org. And then also at the Art Center is the new exhibit Sheets, Father and Son, Art for Pleasure and Business, featuring works by artists Millard Sheets and Tony Sheets. And the opening reception is 4 to 6 p.m. And that will run through March 5th as well. And then down at Fort Ross, they've got a special event happening Saturday, 1 o'clock. They're going to explore the ancient forest of the park and some of its most noteworthy trees. And then they've got a basket weaving circle at 3 o'clock, and that's at the Fort Ross Historic Park down south of the Sea Ranch, and also Stewart's Point. And then up at Point Arena at the Arena Theater Saturday night, it's a surf movie, and it's going to include locations from Portugal to Hawaii to Northern California. That'll start at 7 o'clock. And then for Friday night and Sunday, they've got Avatar, The Way of the Water, 3-hour, 12-minute movie that I hope to catch soon. And that is going to do it for our announcements for today. And again, I want to welcome Stella James from the United Kingdom. She's near the southwestern portion of England. And I'll give a little update on who she is first, and then we'll get into welcoming her to the show. When she was a child, her dream was to have a magical relationship with a horse where they were as one together. And during a lifetime of study, she has learned not only different aspects of horsemanship, but was also certified in many modalities and disciplines. We are going to get into all of these different disciplines and modalities, but they do include basic classical riding along with natural horsemanship, such as the Pirelli approach, biomechanics, Bowen therapy, yoga, and yoga sports science, and neuro-linguistic programming called NLP, a model of how we communicate to ourselves and others. Even hypnosis and Huna. Boy, we have a lot to talk about with Stella. Welcome to KGUA on the way on the other side of west of you in Gualala on the Pacific Ocean. How are you, Stella?
Thank you. Good morning to you, and it's good evening to all the people in the UK.
Oh, that's right. I loved talking with you the other day. We went for about 2 hours and we could have gone for another 4, but we're going to try to stick to an hour today to cover a lot of ground. You've got such an amazing repertoire of information in your head about the different approaches that we can take. Why don't we start with why you named your business Ethical? Explain how you came about that.
Well, it was during a personal development exercise, and I've been reading a book called The One Word, and it was about what one word describes you and your business. So I went through various options, and then it popped into my head that ethical was my word. And so I've adapted that word, and it's funny you should bring that up because I've been thinking about that while I was driving the car earlier today. And each letter is representative of a condition, if you like. So E is for empathy, T is for truth, H is about being humble, I is for intuition, C is for communication, A is for awareness, and L is about something we call in Huna lokahi, which means being at one with oneself, as well as everyone else around you. So I just thought that that epitomized not only who I am, but also what I wanted my horsemanship to be.
And I'm working on a documentary where we talk a lot about the healing connection between horses and humans. And so this talk with you is helping me learn so much more that I'll incorporate into that documentary, and also for this podcast that I'm building with this show, because there's so many different approaches that are being taken today. We're learning so much more about how to connect not only with other horses and with our own horses, but also with each other. And you mentioned the word huna. That's a Hawaiian term. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, huna means secret, but not in a way that we're not telling anybody else. It's more about secret wisdom. And so it's about the ancient teachings of Hawaii. And Uncle George, who was one of our kumus, who suddenly is no longer with us, used to say that God loved the Hawaiians most of all because they didn't give them diamonds, they didn't give them oil, they didn't give them any other precious metals, they gave them aloha, which is love. And that just epitomizes how the Hawaiians are. But they're also very connected to their environment and their surroundings. So they would connect with the earth or the sea or whatever it was that they particularly wanted to connect with. Say, for example, they wanted to go fishing. So they would consult with the sea god and say, where are the fish today? And the sea god would point them in one particular direction, or he would say, there aren't any fish today. So they'd go home. So but they're also very humble. And humble isn't about being subservient. It's about not having to shout about who you are, because you know who you are, and that is sufficient, and your energy is good. So you don't need to say, I'm the big, whatever it might be, because your energy speaks for itself. So it's a matter of not judging anybody else, working from aloha so that you love everybody, and you love yourself. And that's more important, because if you start with you, then you can give it out to others. So, and if you think about that in relation to the horses are very direct at times. And so they give you honest feedback. Might not be quite what you had in mind, but they don't pull any punches. But they are humble in who they are. They know who they are, and they encourage you to be the same. And for me, one of the biggest things that I've learned, certainly in the last 10 years or so, is that natural horsemanship, it isn't about the horse. It's about you as a person. It's about personal development. And you have to learn to be more patient, more tolerant. You have to be in charge of your own energy so that you can communicate with the horse at their level. They shouldn't have to learn human. It's for us to learn horse.
And this is a lifelong learning process. It's not like we achieve it and we're done. It's an everyday working with ourselves to be present, to be aware of our own energy, and observant of how we're being reflected by the horse or by another person too. That seems to come into play. And there are like 7 different principles, is it called, of Huna, or several different ones?
Well, with Huna, I mean, there are different schools of Huna. I've been studying Huna for 23 years now. I started in September 2000. And even though the first 2 days of the workshop are exactly the same in terms of content, well, or in terms of topic, I get something new every time. And so each time I go, I learn something new about myself, or I get a better grasp of a principle or something like that.
So I'll step back a little bit and go a little bit back to the broader overview of what you do with your services. You provide teaching and training. Can you describe a bit about what you do for others remotely and in person?
Okay, well, I teach a variety of different people from the age of 6 right up to the oldest pupil, I think, was 80. Prior to COVID, it used to be from 4 years old. And so within that age bracket, there are lots of different types of people, abilities, and it's not always about ability, it's about attitude. So you can have someone that has the right attitude with their horse, gets better results, even though they may not have the experience, than someone else who's got lots of experience, but not quite the right attitude. So quite a few of the children that I teach are on the spectrum. So they might be dyspraxic or be labeled as autistic. And the great thing is that the horses bring out the best in them without even saying a word. They're just the energy, they just connect. And for me, that helps me become a better instructor, because I have to learn different ways of communicating with different people, different children who have different ways of learning. Some people are very visual, some people are very auditory, and some people need to feel. I personally am very visual, and I tend to speak in visual terms, but if you're auditory or kinesthetic, that's not going to work for you. So I have to learn to change the way I communicate so that whoever I'm communicating with gets what I'm trying to tell them.
That is very observant. It's paying attention to your audience, the person that you're working with, and really understanding it in a way that even I hadn't thought of before, because you're really taking into account not just how you want to share the information, but how they're going to receive it. And if they're not going to receive it in the way that your standard way of delivering it, then adjust it to the way that they can better understand it. And if you're just tuning in, I'd like to let you know we're talking to Stella James, who is a lifelong horsewoman and teacher, trainer from the UK and England, the southwestern portion. And we've been talking about her business called Ethical Horsemanship and breaking it down to different aspects of how she approaches that. And she's had a lifelong learning experience with classical riding, natural horsemanship, biomechanics, the Bowen therapy, yoga practices, and so much more. And that's what we're talking about today here on Peggy's Place, here at KGUA in Wallala, on the way west of her on the Pacific Ocean. Our studios are overlooking the Pacific here on the Northern California coast. And I'm your host today, Lindsey. And I forgot to mention that this documentary I'm working on called Seabiscuit's Legacy has a director named Nadia Jordan, and that is Stella's cousin. So that's how I got connected with Stella. And I'm so glad Nadia put us together, Stella. And so let me go to ask you about your website. There's on the About page several titles that you've got. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Maybe take each one and break them down for us, starting with BHSAI.
Okay. So the British Horse Society is what the BHS stands for, is a national organization which you can become a member of, and it helps you to have insurance. So when you're out riding your horse, that covers you for any mishaps. But it also provides lots of different aspects of what you can do with horses. So part of the British Horse Society is the Pony Club, and that's for the children. And so the BHS provides a series of examinations or tests that you can take relating to ridden work or stable management, and so that you can progress up the levels. So AI stands for Assistant Instructor, and so I qualified in that a little while back. I'm also an intermediate stable manager, which is the next qualification up. So you can choose how much or how little you do. And nowadays it's modular and you can actually specialize. Whereas before, when I did it, it was across all disciplines. Now you can specialize in dressage or show jumping or horse trials, whatever is your passion. So that's what that's all about. And the nice thing about the British Horse Society as well is the qualifications are recognized worldwide. So it's not just an in-house qualification. It means that, you can go to Hong Kong and they'll know what you're on about.
That is very important. And we're also talking, before we go into some of these others, I just wanted to mention too, you do work with children. And one of the parts of our film is going to be showing the equine riding therapy that is happening over here in Mendocino County at Ridgewood Ranch, which is the home of Seabiscuit, which got me down this path because I was so impressed with the transformation, the positive transformation that these children with autism or cerebral palsy or ADHD would go through when they could connect with the horse and go through this riding program. Now they are what's called Path International trained in their curriculum and how they approach teaching. But you too work with children who have ADHD and autism and other things. And I wanted to touch back on that just a little bit so I don't forget that thread. So why don't you just explain a little bit more about how you approach children with that, with anything along those lines?
Children are unique in themselves in so much as the words that you use with an adult aren't necessarily going to be the words that you use with a child. And sometimes it's just a matter of, I'm sure you're all familiar with KISS, keep it simple, stupid. And sometimes we overcomplicate things, but with children, you have to simplify it.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I think is really important for the children is that they understand the animal they're with. So they understand that they're a prey animal and that as a child, even though they're only a child, they're a predator. And the prey animal, the horse, might think they're going to eat them. So, but I make it into a bit of fun because I go, that pony thinks that your mum and dad is that mountain lion and that's going to eat them. and so they get into that. But it's, as I said earlier, the horse gives honest feedback. but at the same time, they have that connection. It's all about energy. And so we had a little pony at the riding schools that would bite you as soon as wink. And I had a little boy that I was teaching who had Down syndrome. He was 10, and he used to go in, get the pony, bring him out. The pony never even thought about biting him.
Really?
So, yeah, never once.
So the horses are really understanding the child,
Yeah.
and responding to them.
And it's, I think, horses don't actually need words. They don't speak in words when they're together. It's an energetic thing. And I think that's particularly important to remember, particularly for children on the spectrum, because not all of them have speech, or if they do, it's very limited, or they choose not to speak. But they don't need to do that with the horse. And in fact, that was one of the things that was really difficult for me to learn when I did natural horsemanship, because I can talk the hind legs off a donkey. And it was, no, be quiet, just do it through body language. I was like, really? I can't speak? It's just like, and I would forget myself and say, oh, good boy. And I go, nope, not allowed to say that, because you should feel it and then convey that to them in an energetic bodily way rather than needing the words. And it took me a little while, but once I got into it, it was actually much better, because somehow by speaking those words, even though they were positive words, broke the connection because the energy changed. So actually not speaking was better and kept that connection.
The first time I came across that was with Ariana Strozzi-Mazuki, and she was teaching a course of healing with horses from the ground. And since I'm a long time old cowgirl, I started at age 2 riding horses, and I went into rodeo, and I learned, this is East Texas. So my method of learning was way different. And I communicate a lot with words as well, but I learned to start watching my energy, watching my movements, watching how I connected with that horse. And so now with the horse I have, now that I'm into my 60s, this horse I've had him for a couple of years, and I really try to tune in to him, even when I'm leading him from the pasture, always sensing what he is, how he's moving, what he's looking at, where his attention is. And I find that such an eye opener. After all these years, I feel like I have so much more to learn. I mean, it is a lifelong process to learn these connections and tuning in with these animals. And that's exactly what you're doing on a regular basis. And you teach people via Zoom and by phone too, don't you?
I do, yes. Mainly with the horses, though, it's one-to-one, it's face-to-face. And the other thing about the connection is that horses know what your energy is about. So like when people come to the stables and they get on the horse and they say, oh, I think he's in a bad mood, or he feels that I'm X. And I say, he hasn't decided that now. He saw that energy coming before you even got to the stable door. And they go, oh, and it's quite a shock to them to realize that the horses are sensing our energy before we've actually got into their space. So, and the other thing, of course, that we do is we put human labels onto the horse.
Right.
And they don't feel like that, oh, he's being naughty today, he's being angry today. No, actually, he's just being a horse.
Just being a horse, exactly. And I've noticed too that, and this is something I've learned just in the last couple of years, working with other people who do follow natural horsemanship principles, maybe it's Pirelli, maybe it's another form of that, is that really to watch and give time when you ask the horse to do something. When you've asked with your body, let's say if you're in a round pen and you're working with that with your body movements, give that horse time to translate what you're asking.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not something I had done before. So that's another element.
Indeed. And that I say to my pupils, the horse can only ever give you what they think you're asking for, because they have to work out from the signals that you give them, whether, it's from the hands or the legs or the body. And so there's a bit of a time lag between you sending the message and them receiving it and working out what it is that you want. And I say to people, if your horse is not giving you what you want, maybe the horse doesn't actually understand. You know what you want in your head, but this is what he thinks you've said. And the classic is when they're asking for a canter, although in America you call it the lope. So, and they are subtly different, but anyway.
We call them both, actually.
Yeah. So, so the canter, when we do it, is to be in rising trot to start with, maybe go into sitting trot, then ask for the canter. And quite often, if the person doesn't have a secure enough seat, then they're not able to use their legs effectively. And so the horse ends up doing an extremely fast trot. And they go, it won't canter. Yes, it will if you give it the right, give the horse the right instructions. It thinks that you want a fast trot because you're still doing the rising trot, or you're bouncing up and down, your legs are flapping around. So the horse can only give you what it thinks you're asking for. And so it's impressing on my pupils that it's about communication, and it's about doing it in harmony as well. So it's about working together. It's not a do-to process, it's a do-with process. And I think sometimes the children get that sometimes better than the adults, because the adults tend to think from the neck up. They don't connect with their bodies quite so much, whereas children haven't got that into that mindset yet. So they're more in their bodies.
And as we've gotten older too, we have things like arthritis and bad knees or bad backs to deal with. And that's something you have to take into consideration too when you're dealing with someone who's 80 years old, I'm sure.
Indeed. One of the things that I'm really hot on is about position, and it's about being in alignment. And if you're in alignment, then your balance will be better. So, excuse me, this is a bit, this is old school in terms of, sort of the foundation. But we look at a straight line from the shoulder, the hip to the heel. And I say to people, you're not actually sitting on a horse. If we magic the horse out from underneath you, you would be standing with your knees slightly bent, like you would if you're on a shooting stick. And so if you can stand there like that, and then just pop the horse underneath you, then that's how you should be. But 9 times out of 10, the feet are forward, or the shoulders are forward. And people usually, or classic one for women, is they arch the back. Men typically, this is a gross generalization, is they collapse here at the xiphoid. So they slump down and the shoulders come down. But if someone has arched their back or put their legs forward, either or both, that's usually because they're tight in their hips. And so it's a matter of realigning them and also working without stirrups. So that gravity helps with that. So that's very useful. So that to stretch the inner thigh muscles, that then once those are a little bit more flexible, then you can open the angle of the hips and sit deeper in the saddle, and then become more effective and ultimately more secure, which we all want to be more secure.
And in fact, that alignment that you're talking about with your shoulders and your hips and your feet, that's exactly what it is all about in equine, not equine, but in alpine skiing, downhill skiing. I grew up in Aspen, Colorado too. And so I was taught a lot about skiing from a very early age. And same thing, to be centered, to be, have everything in alignment, because as you're coming down that hill and you're going through the bumps, say, you want to be, have a good alignment with your body and the hill. So similar to being on a horse, having that alignment. And Sally Swift is another UK based woman who, I don't know if she's still alive today, but she taught or started centered riding, and you'd studied some of her works.
Yes, unfortunately, no, she's no longer alive, but she lived until she was mid-80s, I think. But she had scoliosis as a child. She didn't actually start riding until she was 13, but all the exercises that she did with her therapist prior to that, she then adapted those to when she was riding to help her with her position. Because if you've got scoliosis, then you're naturally going to be slightly off kilter on the horse, which horses are very good in so much as they will adapt to the rider. And that, again, is about balance. So balance and confidence go hand in hand. And so, yourself, I'm sure you haven't done it recently, but if you've given anyone a piggyback, then if they lean in the wrong direction, instinctively, we put ourselves back underneath them. Right. And that's what a horse does. So that's why if you look left, your body weight goes into your right hip, and the horse will naturally put itself underneath your right hip to help its balance. And so with Sally, that's how it all came about with the centered riding, because it was about getting that alignment, getting the balance. But the one thing I loved about her was that she had these lovely analogies of how to explain that to someone. One of my favorites was that she used to say, imagine that you're a river bridge. So your legs are the river bridge, and then the horse is the river flowing underneath you. And then your legs are the river banks. So they help to steer the river along. Well, for children, that is just perfect.
Yeah.
Another example, which doesn't come from Sally, but has just popped in my head. I was teaching a guy who was 6'2" or something like that. And he was a rugby player. And I was talking to him about keeping the upper body still, but maybe moving the lower body, the legs and things. And he said, oh, like when you're doing rugby. And I said, go on. And he said, well, you hold the ball and you keep your upper body still and you look forwards, but your legs are taking you left. He said, but to people looking at you, they think you're coming straight at them, but actually you're going in the opposite direction. And as soon as he made that connection between the horse riding and the rugby, he got it.
Got it. Well, you are listening to the voice of Stella James from the UK, talking about all types of horsemanship and working with horses and communicating with horses. And I'm Lindsey, your host today on Peggy's Place here at KGUA in Wallala 88.3 FM. And we are streaming around the world at kgua.org. KGUA, GUA stands for the three first letters of Gualala, right here on the Northern California coast. And we're also live on YouTube today. And Stella, this leads me right into the next part of what I wanted to really go into with your background, are all the different therapy modalities, especially like yoga, and that you're a yoga teacher, and also hypnosis and NLP. So let's delve into the Bowen therapy. Let's start with that.
Okay. Bowen therapy is a vibrational energy that works with the muscles and the soft tissues of the body. I first experienced it for myself, and then somebody said the magic words, you can do this with horses. I'm like, okay, here we go.
Let's do it.
So I trained, you had to train and work with people first. And there were times when people were on the bed and I was thinking, I can't remember what muscle that is. And then I'd just imagine them as a horse. And then I go, oh, yes, I know where that is now. So that's how I did it. But what happens is that it treats anything and everything. And it's a bit like dropping a pebble into a pond. So you have the initial plop and then you have the ripple effect. And that sends a signal up to the brain to say, you need to check this out down here in the body. So the body comes down and starts scanning. If it finds something that needs fixing, it fixes it. And then it starts to get all those other ripples. And so it does a full body scan and it looks for the root cause of whatever the issue is, rather than just dealing with the symptomology. So for horses, at one level, it's more difficult because they can't tell you what's wrong with them. And at the same time, it's easier as a therapist because they're more honest in their responses. So if they need to fart, they will. People won't. They go, oh, that's not socially acceptable. And so the response you get is much easier to see. And it's just fascinating how they just accept the energy. And I treated it was a quarter horse, actually, very well bred. And the owners were having difficulty with a particular counter strike off. And I treated the horse on the Wednesday. On the Thursday, I'd said to them, let the horse have a day off and just rest. And then Friday, they rode it again, got the counter lead straight away. So it can be behavioral, it can be gait issues, it can be skeletal, all sorts, systemic. So it covers anything, and it doesn't matter what age you are either. Generally, a treatment is 3 treatments, which are 5 days apart, and there are 3 of those. The only time where you could have it every day is if you're pregnant, because the fetus and the mother they're all changing all the time. So for the whole of the pregnancy, they could actually receive the Bowen therapy. So yeah, I just love it. And every time is different. Even if I'm doing the same horse, we get something different each time. And sometimes they respond by going to sleep. And some get energized. They're the rare ones, but there's one lady that I treat. In fact, I was with her on Wednesday, and initially I started treating her horses, and then she said to me, do you think you could do me as well? And I said, yes, I can. So I took my treatment bed because I'm mobile. And so I treated her in her horse's stable. It was so funny because the horse was out in the field and it came up to its stable and went, this is my stable. Why are you in here? So, but it was lovely. So it allowed to carry on.
And when you talk about the horses going to sleep, I know my own horse, who's a registered American paint horse, he's about 19 now, but he was having some issues with the soreness of his back that we had determined that was what was going on by lots of observation over a period of time and his responses to things. So we narrowed it down to this, and then we started treating him with different acupuncture and chiropractic treatments. And he would go to sleep during the acupuncture, which he has needles all down his back and on his shoulders and on his rump. And here he is hanging his head and really relaxing because of that treatment. And I know that you've had that before too, and the chiropractic, and we would let him have a day off too after that treatment.
Especially if they've not had Bowen before, the energy can be quite big, whether you're a horse or a human. And so less is often more. So, and particularly if you've had a horse or a person who have been particularly ill, then because what happens is the Bowen therapy runs through the meridians, and so it takes the toxins away. And so if that happens too quickly and too much, it can overwhelm the body, particularly with the kidneys, because Bowen therapy stimulates the lymphatics, which for me is the waste disposal unit of the body. And so we encourage people to drink water. Horses don't need that because they'll do it anyway. But that helps to flush out the kidneys so that the toxins don't overwhelm the body and just get flushed out. And then we have 3 W's in Bowen. It's water, walking, and weight. So water, I've just described. The walking, horses don't need to do that either. They're best out in the field so they can do what they do naturally. And weight, it will take as long as it will. And the nice thing about it is the body realigns itself. So if you've got a muscle that's in spasm, the Bowen will actually take it out of spasm and help it relax. Because sometimes if you've got a muscle in spasm and you manage to get it, that's affecting a bone or a joint, and you manage to manipulate it so it's in a different place, if the muscle is still in spasm, it'll just pull it back out again. Whereas with Bowen therapy, it just does it for itself. And the nice thing for me is it's gentle, it's hands-on, and there's no pulling or pushing or anything. So the horses just see it as, nice stroking type energy that they just love.
That's what I was going to ask you to describe, is how exactly you approach a horse, and what do you actually do with how do you put your hands on them, and explain it for us, if you would.
So before I do anything, I ask their permission, because it would be disrespectful of me to just enter their space and just go, okay, well, I'm doing this to you. Again, it's another do with process. So I always ask them permission if it's okay. And then I spend some time running my hands over their body from the head all the way down under the belly, on the legs, just so that I can feel if there's anything there. It doesn't necessarily be an indication of anything untoward. And I often say to the owners, I may tell you something, it's not a diagnosis, it's an observation. And quite often I take photographs as well from different angles. So I will stand on a little box behind the horse, so I'm above and looking down the spine from the tail to see if the spine is straight, and to see whether the musculature in the shoulders is the same, or if it's, there's slight necrosis on one side but not on the other. So there's all little things like that. So we're looking for a certain degree of symmetry. Nobody is as symmetrical, not humans, not horses, but we're looking for something pretty close. And then once I've done that, I start in the lumbar area, and I literally just use my thumbs and I roll the muscle over the bone, and that sets up the vibration. And then I do another couple of moves at the withers, and then I walk away. So I take my energy away and let the horse and the body do what it needs to do. That might be 3 minutes, 5 minutes, and then I'll go back and I'll do another set of moves, might be in different places. So there is a set routine of moves that we do, but I work very much with my intuition. So there are times when I've driven away and gone, oh, I forgot to do that, especially when I first qualified. But actually it didn't matter because it still worked. And then there might be another time when I'll put in an extra move. And that also works. So it's all about the intuition, about how much to give, how not to give. And it's all about keen observation skills, because it's watching the horse, watching what you think you've seen, you will have seen, even if it's really minuscule. So you might see a twitch of a muscle, or the, an eye might wink at you or something. And it quite often it's, very small, but you notice it and you just go, okay, well, I've noticed that. And again, I'll feed that back to the owner. And quite often, if it's been a ridden issue, then I will encourage not only the day off, but I'll say to them, you need to get back on, because you need to be able to tell me next time I come whether the issue's still there, if it's the same, or whether it's changed, and if it's changed slightly or a lot, or has it gone away altogether. So if I don't get the feedback, then that's going to make it more difficult for me to assess what moves I need to do next time.
Well, if you have any questions for Stella James, who's talking with us today about all types of things related to horses and communication and healing, her business is called Ethical Horsemanship. You can reach her on email at equestrianmentor@gmail.com. Is that correct, Stella?
I have to correct you, because I think, oh no, tell a lie. I changed one of my emails, but it wasn't that. You're all right.
Okay, I found that on your website. And that's Ethical Horsemanship. And this is Stella James from the UK. And you have so many titles that it just really blew my mind when I first started looking through this and doing the research. And I thought, what are all these letters, like International SM and BHS and NLP? But I wanted to tell the audience that I just wanted to bring you on the show today to talk about these things, because I find all of this so fascinating. Being a lifelong horsewoman who worked with a lot of quarter horses, we raised hundreds and hundreds. I had quarter horses in East Texas, and we talk about foundation lines. My father really did a lot of research on the lineage and which worked best together. And in fact, working on this documentary came about by just a variety of different circumstances on Seabiscuit's legacy. And it just so happens, when I look back on some of the lineage of the horse I had trained when I was a young girl who came out of the stallion that we had, she was actually a descendant of War Admiral. And it was just a coincidence that it came across. But as I've gotten older, I've begun researching more about natural horsemanship because of Tom Smith and how he worked with Seabiscuit. And I started hearing more about how that became more, and we saw a lot of it, like in The Horse Whisperer, that movie that came out. Mm-hmm. And that is one of your disciplines that you've studied. So that's just, I appreciate hearing from your perspective, and thanks to Nadia Jordan, our director, who's your cousin, who put us all together to talk about these things. Speaking of the natural horsemanship approach, could you explain a little bit about that for our audience and what that means?
Natural horsemanship really is about being observant and understanding the horse. Now, bearing in mind, I'm not quite as started riding and being involved with horses as young as you. I was 9 or 10.
Still young.
Yeah, but I spent a lot of time with horses. By the time I decided to delve a little deeper into natural horsemanship, I'd got a fair few years under my belt. And I thought I knew about horses, but I was just kidding myself. So until I started doing the natural horsemanship, I was like, I don't know anything. And so I didn't know as much about the horse and its natural innate tendencies as I thought I did. And I didn't know as much about me either in relation to my connection to the horses. And just by changing little things made a huge amount of difference between the relationship that I had with them and what I'd had previously. And this is going to sound really very simple. And it was just a matter of putting a head collar on a horse. Now, normally I'd put the noseband or the nose into the noseband bit first, then get the strap, flick it over the head, and then reattach it. And so in natural horsemanship, that's not encouraged. So you keep the noseband and the strap in your left hand, you put your right hand over the neck of the horse, give yourself the strap, then put the nose in and then bring it over. And it wasn't until they suggested that by doing it the previous way, you're actually encouraging horses to be head shy, because when you flick the strap over, it went towards their eyes, so then they would jerk away from you. And I was like, well, that's so
ears.
obvious.
Right.
But yet that's how we were all trained.
And
So,
you know, when you brought this up on Monday, when we talked, ever since I have been doing it the other way. And I remembered, you know, this is actually the way my father taught me how to reach over their neck and pull it on instead of flicking that part of the halter over their head. It gets by their ears, and it just makes complete sense. And I also had a long history in being a Rocky Mountain trail guide and packing into the wilderness. I felt like I knew a lot about horses too, until I started studying a lot of these things. And now I feel like I'm just a beginner.
Yeah, absolutely.
Listening to you.
Yeah. And the same thing with getting on. I mean, never thought about it before. It was just like, well, I want to ride, so this is it. On we get. I get on, off you go. But now I get on the have my foot in the stirrup, and then I place my hip on the horse's saddle, and I wait, and I assess the horse's energy, and I ask permission to get on. And then if I get the green light, then I will get on. I wait again. I say, is this okay? If my horse is okay with that, then I'll put my foot in the other stirrup, and then I'll wait again. I'll probably do the girth up as well, just to make sure the saddle's secure. And then we walk off. And whilst we're walking off, I'm assessing all the time about, is my horse tight in his back? Is he okay with me? And if it doesn't feel right, and my instincts are saying, no, this isn't right, I will get off. I might get back on again, but I will go through the same process. And I did that one time when I got on and it just didn't feel right. And the funny thing was that my horse never bites me, or never tries to bite me, when I'm doing the girth up. And he'd done that a couple of times this day. And I was like, well, that's very weird, but didn't sort of think anything more about it. But then when I got off, I realized that the saddle wasn't quite in the right place. And as soon as I put it in I undid it all and put it in the right place, then went to do the girth up, he never even batted an eyelid. So that was his way of telling me, Mother, my saddle's not in the right place. So now
I've had that before too.
Then I go, oh, okay. And I'll readjust it, because I know that he's complaining because it's not in the right place and it's not comfortable for him.
I'd like to ask you a little bit more about something else that's on your long list of certifications and knowledge that you bring into how you approach communicating with horses and teaching and training, and that is NLP, neuro-linguistic programming. Can you tell a little bit about that in the few minutes we've got left?
I'll do my best. Neuro-linguistic programming, we do it all the time anyway. It's what everybody does. NLP practitioners just have unpicked it, put it back together again, and understand how it works. So neuro is about the senses, linguistic is about speech and communication, and programming is about strategies. So it's not about, at a certain level, it's about programming. So if we understand all those things, like I was talking earlier about being visual, auditory, or kinesthetic, then if I'm a visual person talking to a kinesthetic person and I'm using visual language, the kinesthetic person's not going to get it. So I need to change my languaging to kinesthetic language so that they understand that. And for me, it's given me extra tools in my toolbox for teaching, because it's given me an extra set of communication skills that I didn't have before. And I'll quickly tell you this. I had a little girl who was struggling to do her rising trot, and it turned out that she was highly visual. So we worked out that she had a little picture in her head for riding. It was another child, slightly older than her, and we determined that the picture was in color, that it was moving, it wasn't in a frame, and so it was a movie. And so I said to her, okay, play your movie and go off and do the rising trot. And she got it in an instant. And that wouldn't have happened if I wasn't trained in NLP.
That's a beautiful story too. And you also talked about left brain, right brain, and quite a bit more about that. We don't have that much time, and I know people are going to have questions, so we'll get you to mention your contact information again, but give us a little insight into that, left versus right.
So if you're a left brain person or left brain, the left brain controls the right side of the body, and the right side of the body is about masculinity, it's about action, it's about analytics. Oh, you've just sparked off something else, which you'll send me off down a rabbit hole, because you can determine, depending which nostril you breathe out of, depends which side of the brain you connect to, and whether you become more analytic or whether you become more intuitive. But we'll talk about that on another occasion.
You're definitely coming back on the show another
time. So if you're a right brain, then that controls the left side of your body, which is all about feminine energy, intuition, connecting with your surroundings. So if you've got a horse that is a right brain horse, then they're going to notice every change in their surroundings. So they're the ones who will be spooky, because they'll go, that scary blade of grass wasn't there yesterday, and it is now. Or you might have the same box of something, but you've moved it half an inch one way compared to where it was. That horse will notice that. Other horses won't be so, they may have noticed it, but they won't be so bothered by it. So that's the difference between those two. But the same with us as well. So you get some people who are just in their head all the time, and then others who are much more intuitive and connected to their environment.
And then you throw in introverted versus extroverted.
Extroverts want to move their feet. Introverts don't want to move their feet, and there are different reasons why. So you have a left brain extrovert who wants to move its feet because it has a joie de vivre. So it wants to, has that charismatic thing about it. My other horse is right brain extrovert. He wants to move his feet, but he wants to move because he's frightened. So that has a different energy to it. Whereas my other horse, who's left brain extrovert, is very playful and goes, whoopie-doo, let's go. My other one tends to do that because he's feeling insecure and he's worried. So he wants to run away from that frightening thing.
To learn more about Stella James, look up Ethical Horsemanship. She's from the UK. And Stella, tell us again how people can get in touch with you.
Well, I'm on Facebook, or you can email me and or connect through my website. And so.
Well, thank you, Stella, for coming on today. I want you to come back. I'm Lindsey, the host of Peggy's Place today. And this is KGUA in Wallala 88.3 FM. Stella, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me.
And we'll talk again soon.
Okay, thank you.
All
Bye-bye.
right. Bye. And now we are going to go into Native America Calling. Thank you again for listening to KGUA in Wallala 88.3 FM. And this repeats at 1 o'clock.
Welcome to Native America Calling. I'm Sean Spruce.